Egunon guztioi. Egunon.
Good morning, everyone. We will have a beautiful morning today, so good morning, everyone. Welcome. I would like to welcome everyone here in the room and everyone listening to the streaming. It's wonderful to host this conference on equality, science, and technology for a paradigm shift. And speaking about the paradigm shift, yesterday's session was very intense. In fact, we've confirmed that this kind of sessions are necessary, and this is very positive. So that's why we organize this kind of events. And we've seen that all your contributions are important to be able to progress, and with progress regarding many things, always taking into account gender, science, and technology. But we've also decided to look at the practical side of things, because if not, we won't know if all of this is going to be implemented and worked on. We've worked on the core of this sector. We are, for example, looking into the detection of discrimination through the language and how we use the language and in which communication context we use what. Because at the end of the day, nothing is neutral. You looked at the dangers, and now you can freely choose when and how you want to speak and how you want to look at others. Eva Cuesta from Big Bang Science talked about the bias of women in science and their invisibilization. We also talked about women in media, and it is also important to be aware of this. We need to be in the public sphere, which means we leave that area where we've been left to the side, and we also need to learn how to be part of other spaces. Maria Belloso from the University of Deusto talked about resistance in a theoretical and practical manner, the analysis of resistance at an institutional level. And we also talked about creating a network and working jointly with different institutions, Ikerbasque, Emakunde. So there are opportunities out there, but we also need to create those networks. Barbara and Alejandra from the Rovira and Virgilia University talked about violence, the toxic violence, and that invisible violence that is present and that we sometimes are not able to interpret. Also, violences were defined to be able to identify them and have a remedy for them, and how the patriarchal system also is part of this violence. And what's left to thank you all for your participation. You were all very active. In fact, all the workshop leaders were really happy because they were very pleased with your contributions and how you shared your experiences, because as we know, also personal experiences are also political. So after thanking you all, we're going to now welcome the director of the Basque Women's Institute, Emakunde. Let's give a round of applause to Miren Elgarresta. Thank you, Maitena. Thank you, everyone. In this second session of this international conference, first of all, I would like to thank all the speakers and participants, and also those that will be contributing with their experiences today. We need to progress in equality at all levels, and it is important for all these sectors and spheres to have agents that are engaged. They are the ones that know better each field, and they are the ones that will allow equality to progress. The same things happens in the scientific and technological spheres and in different institutions. I believe this is a Congress that has strengthened synergies and promoted collaboration between different stakeholders. So we're already complying with one of the objectives we set ourselves. Of course, we have many challenges before us, and we've mentioned some of them previously. From the standpoint of gender, science, and technology, well, there is a big gap there. And also when women choose what to study, especially young women, sometimes don't believe that technology and science are spheres where they could be present. Science and technology studies are not targeted to neutral subjects. And there's an androcentrist base that is very obvious because of historical reasons, or historically we've seen how science hasn't taken into account the needs of women, and it has been much more difficult for women scientists to be considered and promoted. So there's a lot more to be achieved. Because of this situation, we want to find solutions and effective strategies in this Congress. As I was saying, there's this gap in the world of science and technology, and we have to look at the reasons that make this happen. And also, we have to focus on the positive side of things, not only the negative side of things. We have to look at opportunities and the possibilities offered by science and technology as change instruments. And yesterday, we had this vision very present. We want for the next generation to be the generation of equality. That's why we promote this pact. And that's why it's necessary to offer transformative tools in the sphere of science and technology that is so important for youth and that is so present in our lives. Today, once again, we will hear and listen carefully to all the experts that will be here with us today. And I want to thank them for your generosity when sharing your knowledge in this subject. So because of all of this, thank you. Thank you all. I hope today is also a wonderful day for each and every one of us. Thank you.
Mila esker, Elgarresta anderea.
Thank you, Ms. Elgarresta. Now we go on to the first speaker for today. As you all know, there's an equality agenda to promote the fight against inequalities. And we've talked about different specific commitments in education, politics, and the economy that have to be present in all spheres of life. Having said this, it is also true that we're speaking about human rights. We've been able to progress, that is so, and we continue progressing and giving steps forward. But as Ms. Elgarresta said, we need to maintain a positive perspective. After the Beijing Convention, it is true that we haven't progressed everything we as much as we wanted or as fast as we would have wanted to. That's why we know we cannot relax. The gender gap continues to be a reality nowadays, and when we choose our jobs and what we're going to study, these stereotypes are very much present. So we have to look at all of these elements. Also, many companies have organizational cultures that do not take into account the gender perspective. So due to this reason, it's not always easy to attract the women's talent. We need more women leaders in science and technology in all fields, but this will not be happening with safety at different levels. So it's necessary to promote safe spaces and mental health. Let's not forget this, because symbolic violence is also present. And it's also necessary to protect our time. No one talks about this. We need time for ourselves. And this means that we need to improve work-life balance, which is fundamental. We also talk about access to technology. This is increasing, but we want to create and access ourselves and to be able to be acknowledged for this. And now I would like to give the floor to the next speaker who will be aborting this.
Action Coalition on Innovation and Technology at UN Women. We look forward to hearing from you on the subject. I will give you the floor.
Thank you so much for this kind introduction, and good morning to everyone. I'm going to test this new technology and failed at it straight away. Okay, let's see how we can move. There you go, the slides. I hope you are all full of energy for this second day. I thought that I would start the day with a little icebreaker that I use with my colleagues and some also of the students that I work with. If I put this on the screen and I ask you if you know who came up with this, do you know who came up with this equation? Raise your hand if you know about this kind of equation. All right, so you probably all know this guy, Albert Einstein, and how often do we use this in our everyday life? Not so much, but we know him. Now, how often do we use Bluetooth, GPS, and Wi-Fi? And how many of you know that this technology came from an inventor that came up during World War II with a system on frequency hopping? Do you know who came up with this? I have 2-3 hands. So there she is. So we're using this technology every day, and we don't know about Hedy Lamarr. And so it shows some of the limitation we have in our knowledge and the limitation we have in the media. I have another question for you. When I talk about exploring space, going to the moon and Mars, which famous names come to your minds? Probably this guy, or one of the many, billionaires that are, making fun of their money to go to space. But not many of us, noticed that a couple of weeks ago, the space agency of India landing their first device on the moon, and this is the team, or at least part of the team, that made it a success. So again, when we talk about innovation, we talk about what? We talk about what guy from the global north, and it really shows us many things. We have all in us unconscious bias. So when we talk about gender equality, it's not a women's issue. It's really a society issue. We are all born in societies that are not equal, and so we have all, seen in the media the achievement of many people that usually don't have the faces and the bodies of these people. And it also tells us that we have to move away from social stereotypes, and which in part we've seen that yesterday. This is what is making a lot of girls not choosing this career, because they think that if they choose computer science or physics or engineering, they have to give up all the other fun stuff in life. And when you look at Hedy Lamarr, she's so beautiful on this photo because she was a Hollywood actress. She's famous first and foremost as an actress, but also she was on her downtown. She loved to do some inventions. So I hope that this was a a useful introduction and then moving to what I do for the UN. So my name is Hélène Molinier. Again, I work for the United Nations. You probably know these colorful little squares here as the Sustainable Development Goals, goals that we need to achieve by 2030, and for which we are incredibly late and having challenges in reaching some of the targets. And so recent breakthroughs in technology has, unleashed a lot of potential hope for us to look at avenues where we can use technology, innovation, digitalization as something that can help achieve these goals. But what we have seen as well is that all this technology comes with new risks, and sometimes risks of making us lose some of the gains that we had with these development goals. And so if we don't do technology using a safe, responsible, and equitable manner, we might not be able to not only reach the SDG Goal 5 on gender equality, but all of the others. The second image that I've put here says that technology reflects the people who make it. And so who makes technology? And we've seen it yesterday. A lot of the people that make technology are men, because only 1/3 of people in STI are women. What we see as well is that 85% of patents in the world come from 5 countries. So we are in a situation where the world is being shaped by a minority, and this minority often use gender-blind or gender-neutral innovation. So it means that everything around us, the infrastructure, medicines, equipment, how we build cars, how we develop cities, everything is being done in a gender-blind manner. And we heard it yesterday. We have still many people that think that gender, inclusivity, diversity is irrelevant to technology or to their field of work. And we have people who don't see the role of science and technology to advance gender equality. And so as a result, we live in a world where women are 72% more likely to be injured in a car crash than men, and 70% more likely to die. And why is that? It's because for a long time, you can see crash test dummies were done in one side, but still, even today, even though we have the data, we have the evidence, when you look at safety agencies, in most countries, for the frontal car crash tests, they only require for it to be done using a male body. It's not mandatory to test your car with a female body. And so there's obviously lots of, lost opportunities, and in this case, loss of life. So it's not just, it shows that, gender, when we talk about gender-responsive technology, it's not something that is nice on the side, it's something that if you don't do it properly, is really injuring people. And if also what this shows is that if you don't do it right from the start, it takes a lot of time to fix it and to get it right. The first crash test dummy was done in 1949, and it took more than 10 years for the world to come up with a female version. And then another 20 years for the world to realize that, oh, well, we should also have the children version because they also are injured. And then, fast forward 15 years to realize that sometimes women are pregnant and that it's not the same body and it doesn't have the same impact. And one last thing that I wanted to show you, and I don't know if some of you have read the book Invisible Women in this room, and I highly recommend it. If you look at the female body, you see that it's what we often see when we're trying to do gender-responsive technology, is that the female body is just a smaller man, sometimes a smaller man with breasts. But you can see that here we need to look at different body types, different strengths of bones, of different features, and this is important if we want to get technology right. And this has a big impact because we have the data for the analog world and this kind of example. But right now we are moving to the digital. And in the digital world, sometimes people don't intuitively see what are the harms that come with this kind of technology. There's less data, but there's still a lot of examples. Example of how discrimination is caused by AI that is biased, how technology, sometimes that is creating for a right purpose, can be used to harass or to stalk women. We have example of health application that don't take into account women's reproductive health. We have examples of digital assistants that are styled as female helpers, or who can tell you where to buy condoms in your area, but cannot tell you where to find emergency contraception. So until very recently, I don't know if you heard about femtech, but femtech has been a kind of digital technology specifically developed to fit women's reproductive health. And this trend only started in 2017. So it's very recent that we see more and more women, and not just women, but also innovators that focus on topics that are seen as usually more of a women interest. But there are still many gaps. And we don't see a lot of technology being developed, for example, for the care industry or for assistive technology. And it's obviously shaping our lives, shaping our work, shaping our education system, shaping how we access our rights. And so there is a huge risk ahead of us if we continue this pattern of gender-blind innovation. So what do we do at the UN on this topic? As mentioned in the introduction, 25 years ago, more than 25 years ago now, we had the 4th World Conference on Women that was organized in Beijing that came up with a very important document called the Beijing Platform for Action that has 12 pillars on what we need to do to achieve gender equality. And so in 2020, we were marking the 25th anniversary of this platform. And we realized that obviously, we're still very far from having reached the targets that we have set, and that we needed not only to accelerate progress, but we also needed to fight, again, a pushback against women's rights that we see everywhere in the world, in Europe, but also obviously in other countries where there is conflict or where there are tensions around the democracy. And so one way to try to accelerate this progress was to create 6 action coalitions, one being an action coalition on tech innovation for gender equality, to try to see how to get concrete commitments to accelerate the implementation of this platform. And this is being done using a multi-stakeholder model and trying to really bring change, especially in Beijing. Technology, digital was not front and central because everything has changed in 20 years. So this coalition is trying to really come up with a blueprint about what are the key areas where we need to improve. And they have identified 4 areas. One is access to technology. One is ecosystem and innovation. How do we make more inclusive innovation ecosystem? One is looking at design, and another one is looking at safety. So I'll get into it in the rest of the presentation, but before I do so, I also want to mention, some of you know about the Commission on the Status of Women, CSW. It's a meeting that is taking place every year in New York to advance global framework on gender equality. And this year, it was on technology innovation. And you can see the number, CSW 67, it was the first time that they look at technology innovation. So it was a landmark. It was very important. We had many experts coming together, producing papers, and so I've listed some of them, some of the very interesting documentation that we came up with, and that include recommendations and also critical analysis of several aspects. This analysis helped us come up with interesting misconceptions, some of them that we have heard already since yesterday. And I'm trying to, move to the next slide. There we go. And I wanted to share with you before diving into the 4 priority topics I've mentioned. These misconceptions are very important because they influence how we do programming, how we do research, how we do our policy work. And the first one is that we have this misconception that the use of digital tools and services increases with universal internet access. So in other words, what we think is that there is an assumption that once connectivity reaches a territory, everyone benefits equally. But all the data shows that it's not the case. For example, if you look at the least developed countries, right now in the least developed countries, the broadband coverage is 75% of the population, but only 25% are online. So there's a huge gap. And out of these 25% that are online, 52% are men, because they are more likely than women to be online and using digital services. So what it shows is that improvement in infrastructure is not everything. That you need to look at many more factors if you want people to have equal access and meaningful access. And these factors are many: are affordability, literacy, digital skills, privacy, safety. Is there relevant content in the right language? Who is the owner of the device in the house? Awareness about various services, agency to use your device, or even access to electricity still in many countries. And so it takes us to the second misconception, is that for all these factors that I've just listed, actually gender social norms are at play and influence whether and how women can access to a device. And what we see is that there are wide disparities across regions and even within countries. And for example, we see that older women, women living in rural areas, or women with disabilities have much harder access to technology. And so we've heard in the media or in your work, you've probably heard about the gender digital divide. But in reality, when you look into the data, you see that it's not one divide, it's just a multitude of contexts that varies and that we have to take into account when we come up with program and policy work. Another misconception, and we heard about that already a little bit yesterday, is that a lot of these gender gaps are rooted in stereotypes. And one of the most common stereotypes is that, well, women are not interested in technology, or even they're less, they're not as good as men on these topics. And so as a result, a lot of the programs or projects that we see focus on women or focus on girls and are trying to make them more interested in the subject or make them agent of change. While what we need is programs that focus on the people and the institution that are perpetuating stereotypes, that are creating education environment that are not supportive, or work environment that are not supportive for women. And so we need to aim at the people who have the power in this institution to make change and drive change. Another misconception is that we hear a lot how digitalization is an equalizer of opportunity. And that, you know, it goes beyond all the human divide because it's technology and it's neutral and it's amazing. And what we see, as I've just mentioned, because we have one-size-fits-all or gender-neutral technology, we end up with a lot of objects and services that are designed by men or that are not accessible for the most marginalized population. We don't see women empowered as creators of technology or innovators. And so this really limits how we can have a transformative effect and have everyone benefit equally. And the last one is something that we came up with when we were reviewing all the documentation. And when you look at digital cooperation, you see that a lot of time it's overly focused on, again, infrastructure, on the digital economy, on technical issues, but not so much on how technology development are affecting our societies, are creating major disruptions. There's not enough investment and not even enough focus on these topics. And we see that, you know, like today, the topic of the conference is gender and technology, so of course we're going to be discussing that at length. But if tomorrow you go to a conference that is just on technology, on AI, on metaverse, you know, any new topic, there won't be a gender lens, or there will be a very superficial one. So we need to make extra effort to see how this can come up in the discussion when we are just talking on technology and don't, have separate space where we talk about technology and gender, but never about gender when we are talking about AI and other topics. So this misconception has really tried to drive some of the work that we are doing and inform the priorities that we have. And so these 4 priorities, we feel that they are mutually reinforcing and that they should come together. It's not one or the other, it's all 4 together. And as I mentioned, the first one is access. So we have 2.6 billion of people that are not connecting to the internet, and we need to really make an extra effort to connect them soon. But we have also to take into account that the ones that are connected, or as I mentioned, where there is coverage, there's still not meaningful access for all. In least developed countries, only 19% of women are online. And so when they come online, we had to make sure that they are in an environment that is safe, that is productive for them, and that is really a satisfying experience. What we recommend is to have mainstreaming of equity and inclusion in national digital policies. And that we have something that we've seen yesterday already with the Horizon programs, and we need much more of that, is to see public and private investment mainstreaming gender in their priorities, so that we do that in research, we do that in procurement, we do that in any program that is being set up. We also need to look at education, at skills, at digital literacy, and again, try to look at the environment and also invest in teachers. We need to look at school infrastructure. We need to look at teacher capacity to teach digital skills in a gender-responsive manner, to do hybrid learning, and make sure that the content is relevant for girls and doesn't have any stereotypes. Because stereotypes is really what is driving a lot of the gaps that we see in STEM studies. And so we have to transform the way that these STEM studies are being taught, and we saw that at length yesterday. The second aspect is ecosystem. And here, what we really try to explain is that when we look at digital services, or if we look at technology, once it is rolled out, it's not rolled out in a vacuum. We need building blocks so that there's coordination across many policy domains. We need to look at skills, we need to look at entrepreneurship, job creation, we need to look at consumer protection, financial inclusion. It's not just one policy domain. It needs to be cross-cutting. And we need to have multi-stakeholder collaboration. And so that we don't just, again, focus on gender project on the side, but really mainstream these issues into each program that is being developed. We need also to look at sex disaggregated data because it's missing and you can't improve what you don't measure. If you look, for example, at startups in Africa, only 3% of early stage funders go to women funder and 76% go to male team. If we want to change that statistic, we need to have an ecosystem approach because it's not one actor or one stakeholder alone that can change such a huge gap. The last part that we looked into is the future of work, and we hear about it a lot, especially recently with generative AI. So how do we anticipate the changing demands for skill? How do we make sure that we facilitate access for women in digital industry, for example, and that we put in place labor and employment policy that not only facilitate the recruitment, but also the promotion and the retention of women in technology and innovation, because we see also this is where we have the most challenging issues. The third topic is design. So here's a bit of a shortcut because it's not just design, we actually need gender perspective in the whole innovation cycle. So design, development, deployment. And so what it requires is obviously having parity and more gender in the team and to try to have them recognized as creator, innovator of technology, not just user. You all know probably the percentage of women Nobel Prize winner in science category, which is 3%. So obviously we as a society, we can all do much better than that. And for that, we need to embed technology, but it's not embed gender and technology, but it's not the responsibility of women alone. We need gender balanced team, but we need cross-functional team as well. We need to combine technical and social science, because that's also one way to bridge the gap and to have more women come to technology and create a multidisciplinary approach. Because a lot of the technology challenges also need to have this social science approach, and the silos between humanities and science are still too big. And if we do that, then we'll be much better at looking at safety, looking at privacy, at inclusion, at equal access to some of the technology that is being developed. We also need to look at transparency and accountability and have a human rights-based approach. I think for too long now we've looked at ethics, and ethics only gets you so far. And now what we really need is human rights-based approach. These principles exist. They need to be followed by government, but also by businesses that are doing technology that are having a huge impact on women's rights. The last topic is safety, and I think we're going to be discussing it even more today, and I really look forward to that, on how we prevent and eliminate technology-facilitated gender-based violence. And I think here we all know, and we've all seen how the internet has become toxic, a toxic amplifier of hate, of abuse, of harassment, and how this hate online is really targeting women and girls in priority. And so we have also seen that it's not just online, and that technology is being used to control, to harm, to silence women, and especially women in the public eye. Journalists, politicians, are women human rights defenders. And it's really creating a vacuum and silencing these voices in the media. So what do we do for that? We need to look at education, because a lot of the prevention against disinformation, against hate online will have to come to education, and how also we engage men and boys as change agents. We have to look at policy and administrative measures, and how some of these frameworks need to be revised and adopted, but also how we train law enforcement, judges, police, to implement them. And finally, we have to look at how we work with the private sector. And I think that it's also something I would like to discuss more today, because we've heard it a little bit yesterday, but how do we reach out to these agents that are responsible for the product design, for accountability, and for making sure that some of the products are safe and respect human rights. So this framework that you've just seen has been adopted at the CSW 67, and so it's a huge contribution for the global normative framework on gender equality, because as I said, there was nothing much on technology before. And so now that we have this clear vision, what we require is strong political engagement, because it needs to be implemented, and member states will have to come back in 5 years to report on this implementation. What we want as well is for this framework to influence the Global Digital Compact. And I don't know how many of you have heard about the Global Digital Compact so far. It's something that is really going to be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to shape our digital future. It's something that was launched by the UN Secretary General 2 years ago as part of his common agenda. And so he wants this compact to come up with an outline of shared principle on how we build an open, a free, and a secure digital future. And one of the risks, going back to what I was mentioning in the misconception, is that, again, as you can see, gender is nowhere to be seen in the framework, because it's cross-cutting. And we all know that when we put gender as a cross-cutting objective, we have a great risk of seeing it disappeared or just be marginally addressed. And so what we really want, and what we're working together with a couple of member states, is trying to see how we can call for gender to really be mainstream and integrated into this compact. We had 10 countries calling for that at the last General Assembly, and the call is still open for any country who wants to join this effort and bring their voice. Because what we want is this compact, not just to talk about universal connectivity, inequality, but also talk about the fact that when people are connected, well, actually, digital inequality is amplified, because this is what we see right now. More and more people come online every year, but the gender gap continues to grow. So this is something that needs to be front and center of this work. What we also want is for them to come with a position on regulation, because we cannot treat innovation and protection as two separate things. And what we hear a lot recently is that, oh, well, if you regulate AI, for example, or if you regulate new technology, well, then we're not going to be able to innovate anymore. And so we really need to look at how we can make sure that regulation creates clarity. It doesn't impede innovation. Safeguard, make technology safer, actually help to have innovation that promotes human rights instead of creating new risks for women. So this call for something that we've heard a lot for the last 2 days, a paradigm shift. And so to have this shift, we need to reshape our ecosystem. At the CSW, the UN Secretary General said that we cannot let the Silicon Valleys of our world become Death Valleys of women's rights. And I think it's a very strong statement, because it really calls for shared responsibility, for aligned effort among all stakeholders. And this is what I really like about this conference here, is that it's a whole of society approach. It's government, it's regional and local authorities, it's research centers, civil society, it's private sector together. And so if we don't have at the core the government political engagement to generate, explicit, strong, sustained commitment, then we don't have all these actors, I think, coming together and starting this change. Because if we wait for self-regulation, if we wait for ethics principle, we see where it takes us. We have companies that are ignoring or underinvesting in areas that are critical for a lot of us, and for children, for girls, for women, and for the safety of people online. So I'll end my presentation with one final example, and I want to bring us back on generative AI. We know that, for example, if you take Instagram, it took years to get 100 million of users. For ChatGPT, it took 2 months to have 100 million of users. So we're in a world where we're racing technology at a pace that is exponential. And we don't know what is going to be the impact. But what we know, what we've learned, is that from social platforms and from other digital technology that we have developed, is that if you are not very careful on how these technology is accessed, is designed, is regulated, is managed, then you are at risk to have bias, to have harm, and not to be able to control it. And again, we will miss a unique opportunity to reduce inequalities. I don't know if you've heard about a Bloomberg investigation made recently. It's a very good article. You should Google it online. And so it really shows the challenges ahead of us with AI, and how AI is actually taking racial and gender disparities to the extreme, and to a scale that is worse than the real world. And so they did an analysis of 5,000 images of people, and tried to prompt the system to create a representation of typical worker in some high-paying occupation and some low-paying occupation. And so what you see is that obviously women are underrepresented in the high-paying occupation, but in the low-paying occupation they are overrepresenting. So this matches nothing like the real world and the data we have. If you take judges, only 3% of the image that were generated were female. While if you take the US, 34% of judges are women. If you take Europe, it's 50%. But if you ask AI, this is what you come up with. Not only an overrepresentation, but also of gender, but also it has the same effect when you look at race, and you see some race and ethnic patterns that are much more put forward for low-paying occupation and for high-paying occupation. And so it shows the multiplayer effect that we have with technology, and it has a big impact because by 2025, which is really 2 years tomorrow, more than 30% of the marketing content will be created by AI. Some estimates says that the internet in 2026 will be 90% of online content will be generated by AI. So it means that we are going to be using databases that are biased to create knowledge that is even worse than the one we have right now, and the one we have right now is not progress already. So not only we will not make progress, but we're going to go back and lose some hard-won progress in the fight of gender equality. So I'll end now. I thank you so much for your attention. I obviously invite you to join Gender Equality, to join the Action Coalition. Spain and so many Spanish entities have been and are commitment maker, active commitment maker to the coalition. So we're so glad to be here today. And so we really want to continue this collaboration and work together for a more feminist digital future. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your powerful lecture, Hélène Molinier. Let's start. We have a few minutes. Let's start with the Q&A. Do we have any question among the audience? No? I'm going to, oh yes, one. Wait a minute, please. They are going to approach the microphone.
Thank you. Is that working? Yeah. That was fascinating. I've got so much that I want to talk to you about, but I thought I'd raise one point because you talked about the relationship between privacy, security, and safety. And one of the things that I've become aware of is that when women leave abusive relationships, the point of separation is the most dangerous point to their lives and the lives of their children. And while they can physically remove themselves from places very easily, often when they've been in controlling relationships, all the accounts, the phones, Spotify, everything is owned and managed by their ex-partner. So while they can physically remove themselves, they can still be monitored and tracked and their behaviour viewed. How can we begin to challenge that so it's easier for women to dissolve that connection so they can be truly separated?
Well, thank you, and it's a huge problem, and it's one that is not easily solvable because it requires several things. Because it requires action from the company. Because if you want to change a password or change who is paying for services, you have to actually go through customer service. And so this is one of the conversations we have with the private sector. Is we don't want them just to be better at managing, for example, content online and coming with AI filters that generate much better content. We also want them to improve customer service and to understand the various difficulties that women face when they separate, when they are part of domestic violence relationship, where they are famous profile online and they are being harassed and they need to change a lot of the settings that they are using. And there's no one solution. I think something that we need to do is to really be proactive in sharing this information with women so that you know that you need to change your passwords, that you need to change some of your accounts, that you need to know that if you have Siri in your house, a lot of these women, sometimes the husband leaves the house but still has control to Siri and can still listen in to conversation happening in the house. So the more we move to these smart appliances and Internet of Things, you end up with a man that is not in the household anymore, but can control your Siri, your fridge, sometimes your car, and track where you are going or where your children are at any moment. And that's not an easy target to do because we need to really teach about women, these women, about safety, about security, about all the risks that come with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Another question? Maybe we have time for another one. I will have the pleasure to ask myself. The four aspects or categories of gender in technology and innovation, access, ecosystem, design, and security, which of these features is most evolved in terms of having a gender perspective implemented? And which one is the least?
I'll start with the list. I think the list, as I've shown, is definitely design. I think there's a lot that needs to be done. The presentation from Londa yesterday was really, really important because it showed all the efforts that they make to really document it and come up with concrete examples on how you can bring a gender lens to almost any type of research that you do. And this is still something that, again, that is being seen as something nice on the side or something that that you do if you have time, or something that you do because you have a woman on the team and it's our special interest, and not as something that is fundamental, really fundamental part of the research. And that's why what Horizon program has done is so important, because it really mainstream and tell everyone that, you know, this is core of what you should be doing, both in terms of how you do the research, but also the team dynamics and how you involve women in what you do. I think for the most evolved, I would say it's between access. Obviously, for technology-facilitated violence, it's something that is really coming up strongly. So a couple of years ago, I would have told you, like, there's nothing much happening. But since COVID and the fact that we've seen that it was almost the silent pandemic of online violence, and all these people having to shift online and realizing that all these women that shifted to have access to services online were actually harassed or abused or had a lot of issues with while they were obliged to be online to have their work or to have access to education. So this has come up much more. So that's something where we see a growing interest, we see more data, more research, but we don't see a lot of avenues for remedy, unfortunately. But I think we'll discuss that.
Yeah, we will speak about it in the next roundtable, or the other one. Yes, we will be speaking about that as well. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Madame Molinière.
Merci.
Ciao, Madame.